You may have been to the Cincinnati Observatory to look through the telescope and look into the sky, but there's a sign outside of the Cincinnati Observatory that talks about a history not related to astronomy, but instead the foundations of meteorology.
Cincinnati is known for a lot of firsts, and one of them is Cincinnati had the first published weather forecast, and surprisingly it came from the Cincinnati Observatory.
After working on the East Coast in academia, Dr. Cleveland Abbe moved to Cincinnati in 1868 to become the director of the Cincinnati Observatory, which was in Mount Adams at the time. Heavy plumes of smoke towering from the city to the sky directed his focus away from astronomy to meteorology.
During the off hours, he would use the telegraph lines to communicate with cities around the country and basically through Morse code, through the dots and dashes, ask them what their weather was.
Being a good scientist, he collects all this data and he charts it out, maps it out, and he starts to notice a pattern where the cities in the west will report a weather system, and then a few days later, a city due east will have the same weather.
Word quickly spread in Cincinnati of his ability to see weather trends and create a forecast.
The name of the city nickname was Porkopolis because the city was the largest supplier of pork to the nation. And they needed to know when it was best to run the pigs down the street to the slaughterhouse. They wanted the good weather for that.
He was able to write weather columns which were sold to the city newspapers, and as a result Cincinnati was the first city in the world to have newspapers with weather columns.
Eventually, his success as a forecaster brought him to even higher heights.
And when the folks down in Washington got wind of this guy in Cincinnati forecasting the weather, they recognized the huge strategic advantage of knowing the weather of a battlefield the day before an engagement, for example. And so they invited Abbe to come down to Washington to go to work in the War Department, forecasting weather for the Army.
Because of the work he did in Cincinnati, and then when he went to Washington, he gets credit for founding the National Weather Service.
In the scope of weather history, Abbe's discoveries in Cincinnati made him a weather pioneer.
He was a very detailed-oriented person. He was very accurate with his records, his training, his standardization of the people, the records they kept, the instrumentations, the instruments, he would calibrate them, and that was done across the country, long distance. And it was amazing how he was able to standardize. So Cleveland Abbe is then what we claim the father of weather prediction, at least in America.
I'm meteorologist Scott Dimmich, Local 12 News.